Hey, and welcome to the BBA Today. This is episode number 105 of the BBA Today, the podcast where we cover the Brewster Baseball Association every day. It is June 18th or June 25th, depending. There could be a sim going on right this minute. And we won't really know for certain because at least I won't because I'm looking at too many different things. I am Ron Collins. I am the general manager of the Bikini Krill, which you cannot tell by my tiger shirt, but you can tell that I am with Kurt Ember, the general manager of the San Fernando Bears, by that spiffy, amazing team gear shirt that the man is wearing. Kurt, how are you doing tonight?
It's a officially licensed Brewster product. Got it in the team shop. We sell these things for $79.99. So
Oh,
just
that's a
let me
deal.
know if anybody else wants their own Bears shirt.
That is a deal because in
The best
2063
franchise
prices, that's like nothing.
is nothing. Yeah, so can't believe what happened to the dollar. But yeah, I'm surprised you're distracted from a possible Simron. I mean, it's not like there's been that many trades to have to try to review here as you're catching up on the happenings of the
Yeah,
league.
the good news is, I've had about a week as I posted. I've been spending a lot of time on some of my writing stuff, and I've got a really fun Kickstarter that I'm going on, and I've been copy editing, running through my version of copy editing of another book that I've been writing, and so things have been a little busy. It's been a good week to be away because it's been so slow. There really just hasn't been much of anything happening, except for those couple of quick trades, and I'm sure we'll run through them. It won't take very long to go through the trades because there's almost never any trades in the middle of in the middle of June, as far as that goes. I'm certain. Um, but maybe we can spend a little bit of time first. Let's run down the standings. Maybe let's start in our own Pacific. Let's go backwards. Let's start in our own Pacific division as we're sitting here on June 18th. The numbers. Portland is sitting at the top still, coming back to the pack a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Pacific right now?
Portland is the team to beat. They finally made a trade for the first time in a few years that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But Chris seems pretty engaged and has a great frontline pitching staff and a great offense. Um, Might need some relievers, but I think I think his team's solidly ahead of yours. I like your team. I think you probably have a playoff team, but I think you've been kind of hurt, so take this with a grain of salt. But you've been overperforming maybe a little bit. You got some youngsters, so maybe they're on their way up. But I think you and Hawaii look like pretty safe playoff contenders. But I think Portland will be the division, the team you got to chase in the division, and then watch out for Vancouver behind you. Aaron's dangerous, and they are moving up the standings.
Yeah, I think Vancouver is the story of the moment. They're the hottest team in the division, and Aaron is busy, like Aaron is wont to be, clearly making a play in some of those very few trades that I'm sure that we will be talking a little bit. I think in the context of the division, some of the big shakeups right now is Long Beach Lane has been executing a tailor-made tailor-made fire sale. I think he's anything that has a value on it is going right, and so that's been interesting to watch from afar. I was not expecting Long Beach or Valencia to do a whole lot anyway this year. I don't think that's a massive surprise. What I am surprised by is Sacramento is down at 32 and 40. I expected them to have a more difficult season this year than they have in the past, but I was not expecting a sub 500 number from them right now. So I admit I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit about them. My Bikini Krill, I don't have any problem with somebody saying that we're overperforming a little bit because we almost certainly are overperforming a little bit. But yeah, I'm very interested to see what's going to happen when we get our guys back. If somebody had told me 6 weeks ago when Keith Williams went down and then shortly thereafter Winston Morris went down that we would be only a game out of the division, I would have taken that and run without any problem whatsoever. So we're getting to that stage where you never know if we can manage to put together a hot streak. Then my chances the bikini krill chances will be stronger. But no one is betting the ranch on us right now. I agree with you on Portland. Chris is focused, and I think I said that last year when Portland was crashing. Right. One of the beauties about this league, and Chris and Portland, I think, are a great example of it. Is it's very, very hard to take your foot off the gas pedal for more than a sim or two and not pay a price. And when you get real life people and life getting in the way, that's a little bit hard to keep up with sometimes. So I think Portland paid the price for that last year, and I think Chris is dialed in this year, and it'll be interesting to see. Let's go up to the Heartland. Nashville sitting 5 games up. They're perhaps taunting me with my claims that they're not going to win the division this year. But it is quite the interesting scrum because Heartland, the Heartland division, as we've talked about before, has grown up to be the big division in the Frick. They have 6 teams over 500. Thoughts on talk to me about Chicago, Louisville, and Yellow Springs. They're within they're all within shouting distance right now, and there's a lot of the season to go.
Yeah, they're hanging around. I'm kind of I'm a doubter on Louisville and Yellow Springs at least. I just don't. I think there's going to be 4 wild card teams, and I think it's mostly going to come down to Des Moines, Twin City, Bikini, Hawaii, Vancouver. Just 5 teams for 4 spots. Chicago will be the next team, so they're in the mix. And as we'll talk about the trades, I couldn't even tell you. I don't know if I could name 15 players on Des Moines' roster, even if you gave me, even if it was an open book test and you gave me 20 minutes to figure it out. So they have a good record. I don't know what they're going to do in the second half. So that could present itself as an opportunity too. But yeah, Nashville put the foot on the pedal. They made a couple of big trades. They've gotten hot. They're going to maybe finally stop messing around with Kramer in AAA, although I want to say I looked it up and he's got like a sub 800 OPS in AAA, so maybe he's just bored. I don't know. We'll find out when he gets back in the Brewster, but it's at the moment looking like it's Nashville's division again this year. But to give you some credit, I don't know if they're going to run away with it.
Yeah, and I still don't think they're going to run away with it. And actually, Des Moines making all the trades may actually make that even more likely because I still think Twin Cities is the candidate to take them down. I don't think Des Moines is the candidate to take, or was the candidate to take Nashville down even beforehand. The difficulty in the Heartland is that they actually have so many really solid teams. One thing that will hurt Chicago, I think, at this stage, and this is, again, I'm talking from a 5,000-foot level for the past week, but I think one thing that will hurt Chicago's chances is the Long Beach fire sale. Valencia was already struggling. You put another extremely weak team in the Pacific, and then once we all get back, theoretically, knock on wood, there are more victories for the middling teams in the Pacific than perhaps there will be for the middling teams in the Heartland. So I think Chicago needs to make their hay right now. I think they need to make their hay while they're playing the Pacific, and we'll see what happens when the real trade deadline comes. So it's a fascinating thing. My hot take on Carter Kramer is that he is not the player that he appeared last year. I think he overperformed last year. He is still a brilliant, fantastic player. I would love to have him on my team. I just don't think that he's a silk candidate kind of kind of a player
It was
every
a
year.
career year.
Yeah, I
What
think
you're
he had
saying?
pretty much a career year going, and what did he end up with? Something like 7 or 7.4 WAR. I'm making that up off the top of my head. I mean, I think he's a solid 4.5 to 5.5 WAR player on the whole. That's a very good baseball player. But if you're looking at he's the guy who's going to carry you to the championship, that may not be the right answer for what his career is going to wind up looking like. But I could eat crow on that one too. You know,
Nine power players can be tough with 3 avoid K. Like when
yeah,
he hits 48 home runs, he'll have a good enough batting average, and
right.
he
I
can lead.
mean,
I mean, he hits 48 home runs.
Mike McClure was an 8 power guy with a 3 ABK, and he had some pretty okay years, but he's not. Kramer's WAR is additive because of his center fielderness, right? So
Yep.
anyway, there we go. Let us talk about the Frontier, where our beloved Phoenix Talons are back on top by 2 games as of the 18th of June, with Calgary second. Rosenblatt has moved up into 3rd place, equally because they are on a decent run and because our commissioners, Las Vegas Hustlers, are 3-7 in their last 10, and they are under 500. I cannot remember the last time Las Vegas was under 500 in mid-June. I'm sure it must have happened here moderately recently. I just cannot remember it. So the Frontier seems to have scattered a little bit. There's a pretty big jump right now between the top 3 and the bottom 5, which surprises me a little bit. I thought it was going to be a little bit more competitive than it has been.
Yeah, that's about to get worse too because they're playing the Atlantic now, and I think Phoenix and Calgary and Rosenblatt to an extent can compete with some of those Atlantic teams, but um, those teams in the bottom half of the Frontier are about to about to enter a world of pain. I think the Atlantic is tough. Like in the Atlantic, you've got a team like Cape Fear in 6th
Mm-hmm.
with a positive run differential, and they're probably the 4th best team in the Frontier or something like that. So um, I think the question will just be, can Rosenblatt stay in the mix to try to get the Frontier 2 wild card spots? And it would help them, I think, if Vegas keeps fire sailing and actually gets worse for once after a fire sale, because it feels like past teams often are like better after fire sales. Um, so we'll see.
I do not know how Matt does that, but for
Mm,
some way it seems to work out. So yeah, and I think you're right. The Atlantic is as competitive and as tough as they were advised. The Heartland and the Atlantic are the 2 deepest divisions, I think, in the league right now, and it is borne out by Woody's Cape Fear team. They're right now at 31-41, so their record does not look as good as their run differential, which I know I'm certain is bugging him, without any question. And this is a division where underperforming your run differential is death. Um, you know, Jacksonville is back over 500 just barely now after a 4-6 last 10. Atlantic City, I have to admit my heart roots for Atlantic City. I like to see them moving up. There is a not unreasonable chance that the Atlantic will have at least 4 postseason teams, and if so, Atlantic City is right there in the mix. Charlotte continues to be one of the most intriguing stories of the season, simply because of the Yakwatnata injury and how they started so slowly and have come back through it. And then, of course, Montreal and Charm City just seem to be. It's like watching a automobile race where the 2 front runners are just swapping places every 2 laps, right?
yeah.
One guy leads for 2 laps, the next guy leads for 2 laps. So what an interesting division right now. Do you have any projections or thoughts about who's going to come out of the Atlantic right now? If you were forced to choose, who would you pick?
I might take Charlotte. We'll talk about the trades.
Hmm.
They picked up a big fish in one of their trades, and um, you can't really go wrong with any of the teams. They'll all be neck and neck. So
Yep.
uh, the interesting thing to me is like I feel pretty confident that the Atlantic. Uh, I think the Atlantic will get 3 wild cards. I'll go on like record of making that prognostication, and I got a feeling the third one won't be Atlantic City.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to see if Cape Fear can straighten out the ship very quickly. They've already dug a bit of a hole, but Jacksonville's lurking there, only 3 games back of Rosenblatt. Um, Maybe they make a big splash. They have like a ton of financial wiggle room, I believe.
Hmm.
So um, that's what I'm keeping my eyes on.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that, and maybe we can roll into the trades right now, because I know we had a collection of things we're going to talk about, but I have a feeling that these very few trades that we've had this last week might take us a little while to get through. So we'll see what we can do. Um, One of the things that I think about seeing, in all seriousness, seeing the magnitude of trades. I think we counted them up before we started broadcasting. Those are 24 trades, I think, in the past couple of days, and we're not talking about a whole lot of just small little meat and potatoes ones. We're talking about some pretty big deals. So when you start talking about a team that has a lot of financial resources, I mean, in my team, I've got a lot of financial resources I could throw at this, but how much is going to be left in the trade market to throw, right? How much is still out there? There is still some, but when you have a great big glut of movement at this stage of the season, that you're essentially pulling the trade deadline up, right? As far as that goes. So, um, to some degree, it may get to the point here pretty quick that the rosters that we have right now are the rosters that are going to um, run through for the reasonable time forward. I don't know.
Yeah, you're going to need buyers to become sellers. I think
Hmm.
Vegas still has some players, and that's kind of it. I think we're going to hit, like, if you look at the trade history, there were no trades between May 7th and June 4th. So we went a month as a league without trades. I think we're going to hit a
Right.
similar lull here. I'm sure there'll be some minor things, but I think for a month, to use your racing metaphor, we're
Hmm.
going to figure out like who the different packs are. And maybe somebody else falls out of it and decides to sell. Maybe Cape Fear gives up, or Jacksonville hits a skid, or um, I don't know. But
Right.
there's not that many teams left. Look like Louisville's maybe throwing some players out there. So
Yeah.
the other thing is people have to want some of these guys that are put on the block.
Right. You'd have to think that right now all of these teams are competing. You would have to think that another 3 or 4 sims into the season, maybe you might see the Louisville's, Yellow Springs, Chicago's. Um, if they're fading or not looking as strong. Aaron in Vancouver is always a candidate. If things are not looking at the right moment, he will pull the trigger on whatever he wants to do. So it could still be a very, very active trade deadline. It's just a lot of the early most likely candidates have already moved. And yeah, you're right. Definitely May 7th to June 4th. And then you kicked it off, right? You and
I think they
Justin in
did,
Rosenblatt
yeah.
kicked it off with the big Alexander Swanson in Sonny Bigelow goes to Rosenblatt for Orlando Hernandez in short A, Ivan Soto in double A, and Federico Linares. How do you pronounce that? I don't know.
It's Linares in my head.
Linares. I like
Linares.
Linares. That sounds right. Um, you were involved in that. What are your thoughts? What were you thinking as you were moving Swanson and Bigelow? I know you've got what is it sitting is your center fielder of the future. So it made sense when I saw Bigelow was moving. I wasn't sure where your brain was at with Swenson.
He wants he's a free agent at the end of the year. He wants some money. Probably could have extended him, but like I'm probably gonna shop him. But yeah, Bigelow and Linares are just contract swaps. Just gonna fill like kind of some roles. And it's really just I need pitching prospects. I need to turn like one like Swanson's a middle rotation starter. Miscast is my ace, and
Mm,
so I need it. I hopefully can find some other middle rotation starters if need be. He's been on my team for 10 years. I'm gonna miss him. He was my first round pick that really worked, but he's got he also have high end five stuff and like five movement because he has skated by for years with that. But if that just like kind of tapers off, he could become just kind of a batting tee. And his strikeout rate has plummeted this year. It's only like it was like 4.5 per nine for me, where he had been hovering more around like 6 per nine.
right.
So if that five stuff has trended down a little bit, I don't know that I want to extend him for like 4 years or something. So I just like the prospects. So I took those two pitchers and ran with it.
There you go. No, I think that that makes a lot of sense. And it made total, like I said, it made total sense to see you moving Bigelow because it seemed like he had lost his place in the plan. Um,
Yeah,
so
and he can field. So Rosenblatt will find ways to utilize him. I think, although he immediately got hurt, and then Hernandez got hurt for me. So that's just the way trades go sometimes.
yeah, there you go.
Um, So there was another trade on that day. That was a two trade sim. Wait till we get to the next two sims. But
Two whole trades.
yeah, this one made some shockwaves too. We saw Commissioner respond with a whoa to this one.
Hmm.
Johnny Laser, I think, was he like the number one overall pick once upon a time for Atlantic
He
City?
was, and he was the number
Yeah,
one pick, I think, of that infamous 2057.
57, right?
Right.
Yeah. There were some good players in that draft. Laser's a 10 range young shortstop whose bat's kind of struggling to come around, so he got moved to Vancouver. Vancouver's just throwing him into the minors for now, so he's depth for Vancouver. But we know Aaron loves defense, and he sends over to Atlantic City two former first round picks, pitcher Fernando Sandoval, third baseman Francisco Dominguez. From
Pardon me.
what I recall, they're both good looking prospects,
Hmm.
like C plus, B minus in my parlance type prospects. You want to have you're never gonna have like a ton of those in your org, so you want to get them, but no premium talent here. Um, so I don't know, kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I like of the two, I like Sandoval better than I like Dominguez. But I think
Hmm.
both of them are solid solid guys to have in the organization. Dominguez, if he bumps even a little bit, becomes really super interesting because he can run and he can play defense at third base pretty well. And if he bumps even a little bit, then his above average bat is solid as far as that goes. And I mean, I still like Laser. I think the woe was Laser's the number one pick, so he has that luster. And was it Allen or was it Woody? I can't remember which was saying that at this stage he's lost a notch, and that is true. I don't think he's quite the in quotes utility infielder that I guess it was Allen was saying. But I also don't think that he's like an A number one prime prospect, and so I think the return for him was not was probably less than the social power that the name Johnny Laser brings, but was probably not a bad return from Atlantic City's standpoint. Atlantic City, I think, has a shortstop that they like pretty well, so I don't think Laser was really in the deep plans anymore. But I think Johnny Laser is going to be a perfectly fine shortstop, especially in Vancouver. where they need that kind of glove. Their team has to be leading the league in pitching and defense in that ballpark. Now, Aaron has also talked about potentially changing his ballpark as soon as he practically can. I don't know if he means just getting a new one to cut down the costs and keep it a pitcher's park, or whether he's going to change the park. But if you put Johnny Laser in a different park where defense isn't quite the premium, then perhaps this deal is swayed in a slightly different way. But you're talking about little nits and gnats, I think, as far as that goes. I like Johnny Laser. I'd love to have him on my team as a shortstop, but I just don't think he was the. When I saw that Atlantic City had traded him, which John had already been talking about, he was thinking about trading him. That did not surprise me too much. So.
Yeah, I just wish he'd gotten a center fielder for him, because that's what his major league team could use. But yeah, fair baseball trade. Also helps that Laser Bat's left-handed,
Yes.
so he just needs a little bit more, and he should be able to be like a platoon guy, and the way he plays defense.
Yeah, and the way he plays
Maybe they
defense.
could have gotten more for him, but it's a fair trade.
Yeah, and the way he plays defense, if they've got a couple other fair right-handed bats in the lineup, they can afford to have one guy. You can afford to have one kind of speed bump. You can't really afford to have two or three. That's kind of the Ron's rule of thumb on super defense, on punting a position for defense. You can do that once, but it's hard to do it more than once. So yeah, we went another week. We went another sim after that, and then we got to the June 11th sim, and rather than 2 from the June 4th, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 deals in the June 11th sim. The first of which on my list is the Montreal moving Todd Stone and was it Taki Elia? Both of them off their major league roster for starting pitcher Liam Johnston. I believe that Montreal had already advertised that they wrote a spec, and Eric Brim, the pronunciation is Brim, right? Eric Brim's spec around what they wanted from a pitcher, and they went out and they got it. So thoughts on Todd Stone and Taki Elia. Gosh. Oh, Ron. You're just embarrassing yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
The game moved Taki to second base, but Taki's a first baseman, which makes sense because Montreal's trading him. He's not too much of a prospect. He's got a long way to go, and he's 21, and he plays first base. So, almost worthless in my opinion. Low value prospect. They had to take back a Todd Stone contract. I don't know. Is he still a viable player? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. He's just kind of a middle reliever at this point. So I thought Johnston maybe had more trade value than that. Not a big deal. He's not a world beater. He's just like a 4th or 5th starter. But pitching seems to be a hot commodity this offseason. Johnston, is his contract guaranteed next year?
I thought
It's
that it
not.
was.
It's a team option.
Oh, okay.
It's a team option. So I don't know. That would have made more sense if it was guaranteed. Just being like, hey, he's 36. I won't be on the hook for him next year. But it's a $1 million buyout.
Yeah.
I don't know. Looks like a pretty good deal for Montreal. Not super consequential or anything, but they just needed a body to put in their rotation.
Yeah. I think Taki. I'm not even gonna. I'm just not gonna do that. Yeah, I would not be surprised to see him in a development lab to see if they could bump that up to where he could actually play second base. Because you're right this moment he is not a second baseman. But if with those offensive numbers, second base is another one of those positions where it's hard to find really reasonable offense. If you could just get something almost passable on the defensive side, that's an interesting player because the combination of contact eye, the on base percentage makes him interesting to me. So I would not rule him out as a viable major leaguer at 21 years old. If his ratings are where they're at right now, then he's difficult to find a place to play.
Yeah, I'm not wasting a dev lab spot on him. They're too valuable. This
Yeah,
guy's going to be 22 next year.
that's probably
Nah.
true. That's probably true.
All right,
Pardon me.
next trade. We gotta keep ourselves moving, Ron.
Yeah, we got to get going. We're hit the accelerator, Kurt. Get us going.
All right, so Long Beach. That's a character who's going to recur in our story here a little bit. Uh, they traded Emilio Morales Jr. They're going to retain 20% of his contract. They just traded for him, like, I don't know, 6 months ago or something in game. So I hope he didn't buy any real estate in Long Beach. And he's getting reunited with his old GM. He's heading up to Sacramento. So Ben H picks him up. And Ben H sends him Dave Kane, who I think was pitching in the Sacramento bullpen, but is just sort of a middle reliever. Yorochka Arenkov, 23-year-old pitcher, could be is a reliever, could be a reliever. Looks like he was pitching in Sacramento's bullpen and scuffling a little bit, but he's 23. And then starting pitching prospect Toby Barham, who's in Double A. He's 20. He's the get. He was a second round pick a few years ago. Looks like a C plus starting pitching prospect. So not a big return. The main thing for um, Long Beach is just probably just kind of unloading Morales, honestly, because he makes a little bit of money, and I don't think he really upped his value in his time in Long Beach with his .1 WAR in almost half a season now. The Sacramento needs offense. I think they want to plug somebody into like DH or something, so Morales has a clear spot, but he's just kind of a slugger. I don't think he's a very good fit for their ballpark. Um, but Ben knows him, so maybe Ben's got ways to get him rejuvenated and back to hitting the way he did in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes for a nice story. Um, and you're right. I mean, I think Sacramento's offense has been a little bit of a puzzle all season. They've struggled to score runs. Been on Discord more often than not, bemoaning the lack of the ability to score runs and give their pitchers some run support. I have personally just never been a big fan of Emilio Morales, either senior or junior. Neither one of them hit any doubles. And for those of you who have those of you who are newer to the league will not quite get the full depth of the beauty of that statement. Morales is a fine player. He's, in my opinion, he is a little bit overpriced, and maybe he is the guy that Ben needed in Sacramento to get things going. We'll actually see how things go. But I think that, if I'm in Long Beach's shoes, that is a salary dump move. Morales, the team is not going anywhere. The Surfers are not going anywhere. Morales is not valuable in any way, shape, or form. So pick up what you can. And quite honestly, I like what they picked up. Kane is probably a dollar filler or something like that. But both of these guys, I think, both of these pitchers, I think, can actually show up in the major leagues. Arenikov, he's kind of like a prototypical stuff reliever of the modern era here. So I think he's got a place, and as a lefty, he's got a place. And the starter is just Dave Kane. Yeah, no, Kane is 30. Who's the other guy? Crap.
Toby
Barham. Yeah, Barham. Most likely he's beginning to flesh out. He's in Double A right now. Most likely, Lane is going to be able to plug him into the number 4, number 5 hole for 3 Min Sal years, and he'll put up 4.3, 4.5 ERAs and just eat innings and be fine. He's a 5 stamina guy. Lane doesn't care about stamina. You know, the deal made a whole lot of sense for Long Beach in my brain, and it made logical sense for me from Sacramento's point of view, the way I see it. But I just don't know that that is quite the player that Sacramento really needed. But again, that's my bias on Morales. I don't think he's quite the player that his dad ever was, and in full exposure, I voted for Emilio Morales for the Hall of Fame, so I'm all on that. But I used to always give him hell about his lack of doubles. One of my favorite sets of old time conversations. Another trade, interesting, extremely interesting. You're saying Long Beach will come up here. Long Beach followed that up by trading Reese Atticus, their super all glove defensive catcher, to Vancouver for Mitchell Goder and AAA prospect Dan Sayer, another one of those, in quotes, second basemen. So I found that to be a very interesting deal. I had heard some rumors that something like that might be coming about a little bit before it did, and I honestly, I can see it going. I can see it both ways. I mean, interesting deal. What are your thoughts when you think about essentially Goder for Atticus with the sweetener of Sayer as a bumper prospect? That's how I read it anyway. Do you read it the same way?
Yeah, Sayer barely matters because again, I don't like these guys who get listed in the game at second, but like they can't play second base, and then he doesn't really have the offensive tools to be a first baseman, and he's like an asshole to boot. Uh, and like he hasn't. Part of it's just that he was never really given time to develop in the minors. You look at his history, and last few years he's just been a part-time. Like he's barely played. He hasn't accrued more than 64 at bats in the last 2 years. So
Right.
I guess maybe we don't really know what he is, but I don't know. I think his value is a tenth of a point of whatever
Yeah.
trade currency. So it's all about Goder for Atticus. And Lane, I like Lane's end. Lane would be wise to to say that Goder's been struggling and throw him in AAA for a few sims to get another year of service time. Because I think he was on the Vancouver roster from the get go last year, and if he does that, um, he's got Goder for like ARB prices and another year of league minimum. If he's Super 2, it'd be like 4 years of ARB and 1 year of league minimum. So you get 5 years of Goder versus Atticus, who is signed through 2067. So that is, if you, it's 4 more years after this year. There's some team options at the end, so that's important. The team options are really expensive buyouts. $5 million buyout, $3 million buyout, whereas the base salary is 10 every year. Half of it's covered. So, um, if you're Vancouver, you choose between a $5 million catcher and Atticus every year, or a Goder who would be like league minimum for another year, and then the 4 ARB years if he's just sort of like pretty good catcher, like I think these two are, then he probably averages under 5 per year in ARB. I think that's sort of the math would work out there. Probably like 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, 7 million, or something like that. Goder doesn't play a ton of defense, but he's young. I like Goder better. Atticus could hit when he came up, but that's not him anymore. I think Aaron just loves defense. That's gonna be through line in some of these trades. You know, Johnny Laser, great
Right.
defender. Um, I think I think Aaron's here. I'll give the way to view it would just be Atticus been better this year, just because defense gives him a floor. The idea that I mean, you've been posting about how defense does slump. Like defense comes and goes a little bit, but
Mhm.
catching defense, it's a big sample size, so
Yes.
um, it's probably safer play for them this year. And then going forward, I think I'd rather have Goder. But I kind of think Goder is going to turn around this year. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Goder outwars Atticus this year, hitting for Long Beach. But
Mhm.
Atticus has a head start. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
And I think that's a fair assessment. I like I say I don't really know how to assess it. I can go either direction. And WAR for catchers is perhaps the most squishy of all the wars, right? Because I don't know how Out of the Park does WAR with framing and with its overall impact on the pitching staff. Clearly, there is one, and how that plays out, I don't know. I do definitely see this as Aaron saying, I like Atticus better this year than I like Goder this year. And then you've got the risk question of aging, and yeah, there's a financial thing. I definitely like Lane is showing us how to run a fire sale. Last year, Greg showed us how to run a fire sale. This year, Lane is showing us how to run a fire sale. I like the players that he's gotten. Atticus is another, once Lane decides that the team is not going anywhere for the next year or two, Atticus is what, 28, 29? And so his future, his, his value right now is as high as it's ever going to go. By the time that Long Beach is ready to go again, he's going to be older and an anchor. Why not move him for what you can get? And Goder is a fantastic player to add into the organization. So that is a move for Long Beach, and if it works out well for Vancouver this year and or next, then it's an A move for Vancouver too, because that's what they want, right? So even if they outwar each other in different ways, I don't know what wins or loses. Goder is the better long-term candidate because he's a younger player, a good younger player, right? Um, but in this calculation, I think Vancouver's weighting what's happening in the next year or two much higher than they are out in the future, and can't argue about that. Not too much, anyway. So
All right. Next trade. This one's pretty inconsequential because one of these guys is going to get traded again. Phoenix sends pitching prospect Luis Harris, who's in Double A, and he's 22, and he was a 16th round pick, and he's got no movement on his pitches, but otherwise, kind of almost interesting. He was traded for Bane McCoy, who is a mercenary bat for hire in the Brewster League when he's healthy, and Atlantic City's going to retain half of his contract because Bane got a couple of $1 million through ARB, I want to say. I think Charm City traded him an ARB contract. Um, but yeah, full disclosure, Phoenix is just going to end up trading him.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know. Do you
In
see
con
anything in Harris or
Yeah, it's not in context of this one trade, right? I mean, if you only look at this trade, I don't think Harris is too much of a prospect. I looked at it as just Atlantic City didn't have a place for Bane McCoy, so Phoenix needed a DH. I'll take him off your hand for half the salary. Here, take a human body and make it happen. So, complete logical trade to me, but I didn't think that it was going to be a huge impact. And like you said, we're going to see Bane McCoy moving again, so probably not. Probably don't need to spend a decade talking about Phoenix picking up Bane McCoy for a 7-day contract. It's like the WNBA will, or the NBA will sign an emergency contract for 7 days or 10 days or whatever that is. So let's go on and move up. The next trade, we have two more on June 11th. The next one on June 11th is Charm City sending AAA reliever Gerwin Sear, and short A young Mahood Karif to Long Beach. And Long Beach moves Emilio Reyes, center fielder, while retaining 50% of Reyes' salary. And Reyes is still on ARB, right? Or still in
No,
pre-ARB, isn't he? Oh no, he's 29.
no,
Okay,
he's
never
got
mind. Okay,
8 years. Yeah,
yeah, okay. I'm thinking of someone else.
his
What
his
are what are
salaries,
your thoughts?
his extension's consistent. It is just an $8 million salary this year and each of the next 2 years. So now instead, Long Beach is their salary page is gonna have a lot of R's and dollars following them around with Atticus and Reyes, which would be annoying. And then he's got a team option on the end of it. Um, and Reyes is a guy who was kind of a dynamite player a few years ago. He had a 4-win year as a 25-year-old and a 3-win year as a 26-year-old. And then his bat has just fallen off. So where he got himself above average offensively, now he's back to being just your classic all glove, just good enough offensively to be a starter type player. But that is valuable in center field. He's got 10 range. Probably won't have 10 range at the end of the contract, but if he can have 10 range for a couple more years, um, just fills a hole. Like you're like Charm City, almost superstars at the other positions, but they've tried a few lesser options in center this year and they didn't work out. So now he's just got like an insurance policy of this guy who's just a professional hitter. Uh, oh, what other little baseballisms can I get in here? Just plays the game the right way, knows how to get the job done, just shows up with his lunch pail and does the job.
I think
Um,
you're hitting all the oldies but goodies.
those are for you, Graham, if you're listening. Yeah, Reyes is a good little player, and he's a captain too. So in return, they get a couple of pretty good pitchers. Karif, kind of underdeveloped. Nah, he's whatever. I mean, you want to put these guys in your org, but not a ton of trade value. But Sear, I think he might get listed as a reliever, but he's got 7 stamina and 4 pitches, so that guy could start, need some innings, as you kind of said earlier. Like league minimum salary for a few years in his prime. He's already 25, but he'll probably pitch for Long Beach this year. I would think Long Beach needs probably some innings covered. And Sear, what's he been doing at AAA? Eh, not a ton, but he hasn't thrown very many innings in AAA. He was pretty good in AA last year.
There you go.
It's a financial move. It's kind of like the Atticus thing. He's just not quite as. I guess Reyes isn't as good of a player. I don't know. Kind of surprised Reyes didn't fetch more. Also, the main point I wanted to make is I'm just really surprised that Atlantic City or Chicago were not at the front of the line for Mr. Reyes because I don't know how many more solid center fielders are going to be available. Maybe the money's scared away. Atlantic City. I don't know exactly what Chicago's financial situation is, but both those teams are just running out like negative double digit zone rating center fielders, and I think it could benefit from this. So it's too bad that instead a big dog like Charm City gobbled them up.
That is true. Yeah, I actually wonder whether the movement of the swell of trades that occurred caught a few teams perhaps a little bit off guard, right? Because
Top
you
moves
know,
fast.
if you're thinking that the trade deadline is really going to be kind of moving in July and it really moves in June instead, then you snooze, you lose. But yeah, Reyes probably would have captured more if he were traded earlier. I think some of the luster wore off of him a little bit, but he's still, like you said, a perfectly fine center fielder. And at $8 million, he was definitely, in my opinion, overpaid. But by retaining half, that makes him way more attractive, right? So
Don't forget, he's like a good second baseman too. I mean, he's like a utility guy. He can play all over the field.
yeah, and Charm City does a great job of finding guys like that. I think Dave is a fantastic general manager, which is really annoying.
Yeah. Begrudging respect, Dave.
There you go. So interesting deal, and another situation where Long Beach is turning something that they don't need in the future into some interesting ideas. I do like Sear quite a bit. I think he's an interesting ad. Again, not one of those big name guys, but kind of a player who can make your team better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's maybe that is fair return. I don't know. Lane just shoots from the hip too. I think when it comes to trades, I kind of am somewhat similar if I'm selling.
Mm-hmm.
Just I don't know, give me something. All right, looks good. Let's move on. I think you said you sometimes that's your approach too.
Yeah, well, and especially if you're doing this kind of fire sale. If you're doing this kind of
Yeah,
fire sale, you want to be closing. You want to be moving all the player,
it always
all
be
the
close.
things, right?
Yeah,
And because if you've decided you're going to have a fire sale, you don't want to be left with stuff that you could have traded. That's
yeah.
that's a bad situation. So, alrighty, let's see. What do we have next here? We have Montreal.
Yeah.
This
Last.
time pulling Ryan Harmon out of Cobble Hill for a couple of Mackenzie Roney and Sojourn Bond. Bond. There you go. What do you think?
Harmon's a nice little reliever, and he's pitching really well this year. He's only got a 1 year contract, not making a lot of money. Good pitcher to have. I mean, good for Montreal. I think that is a nice little boost to their bullpen down the stretch. And guy who can pitch in the postseason, guy who's been around the block for a long time and generally always been a pretty good reliever. So understandably, Shulis picks up pretty good player in Roney here. Looks like a Shulis pitcher. Kind of funny watching Montreal and the Robins just swap high movement pitchers because that's both their style. Roney will probably throw a few Brewster innings and be okay-ish. But this is just a veteran reliever who's got an expiring deal getting sold. It's not a big deal. Bond will play good. He's in Cobble Hill now. Well, he might just be in DFA because he doesn't actually
Yeah, I'm sure
appear
he's
in the game.
DFA.
He's defense for your minor league teams so that your pitchers don't get their feelings hurt.
There
But
you go.
was once in my system, so
Ah.
which I forgot about. I heard the name and I was like, that exotic name sounds familiar. Why traded him a while ago to Montreal?
Yeah, Harmon isn't doing anything for Cobble Hill. They get a younger guy with a similar profile, and Roney wasn't going to be pitching in Montreal anytime soon, as far as that goes. So I think that it's a deal that completely made sense. Roney Harmon at 37 is at the end. He fits the Montreal profile. Not a huge deal, but it's one that makes 100% in my limited opinion makes 100% baseball sense. The price is not particularly dear. AAA defensive first center fielder is not going to move the needle for Montreal, or if it ever does move the needle for Montreal, they're in trouble right this minute. Right, they're trying to win a division, and Bond is not going to win the division for them. So Harmon might help them in a place or two. A solid lefty who can keep the ball in the park, who can get an inning here and there, that can make a quiet and silent difference. So interesting and solid move, in my opinion, for Montreal, and a completely understandable idea for Cobble Hill, even though I don't think either Roney or Bond is going to really move the needle much for.
They save a little money too,
Yeah,
right?
they save a little money. So
I-
and a little money for Cobble Hill is still a big deal. So
yeah.
that's all good.
All right. Shoeless is about to get very active here. So now, so we've covered 8 of the 24 trades runs. We're a third of the way there. Looks like the last two aren't super consequential, but we've got 14 more trades to cover here. These are all technically pending because they are going to go into the next sim. But
That's pretty amazing.
first
14,
up,
14 deals. Oh,
well, it's
goodness.
16. It's just the two of them are selling guys who are just innings eaters. But okay. Um, Long Beach reemerges here. Still busy. They trade face of the franchise, I think, and I think Lane's been Lane's favorite player for a while. His
Mhm.
shortstop, Steveland, love that name. Steveland Morris, who's having a resurgent year. Like looks like he could be like an all-star. He's like 36 and his defense is kind of going, but he refound his love of hitting this year. And Portland takes on Morris and his whole contract, so there's no retention here. And I'll note that Morris's contract is a team option next year, so Portland can buy him out.
With a $2 million buyout.
Yeah. So he nets 3 prospects. They're all in the real low minors. Got an A-ball second baseman, Jose Morales, uh, Sharkey. Was a second round pick a couple of years ago. 50 potential. Almost. He's got 6 range, and he's 19. So you know what? I'm not going to give him quite that same treatment I was giving some of those guys earlier. Like, he really could become the second baseman defensively, and he's still young enough at 19 that, like, you could use a dev lab spot on him for sure. So I'll allow that one. He's a switch hitter, and he's got already has his 7 power, so he's just trying to find his hit tool. Herman Ney, 17-year-old pitcher, 45 potential. Might be a starter, might be a reliever, but pretty good arm. 3rd-round pick in the last draft. And then Doyle Patrick, uh, just kind of a flyer. I think everybody was kind of like, why did Lane even have that guy added? But classic lotto ticket type. So really 2 pretty decent prospects for Morris. Morris, just like you said, you got to trade everybody once you're fire sailing. Of course, he was going to get traded. Sucks to trade him to a division rival, but he's kind of at the end of the line anyway, so it's not like you're trading a guy who's got 4 years of control left or something.
Yeah.
And for Portland, I think he's going to play shortstop, and they're going to reshuffle around their defense a little bit. Hopefully he can keep playing good enough defense this year for Portland, and it's a really nice ad for them.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those deals that makes total sense on both sides. And with, in my opinion, more risk on the Portland side, right? Morris being older, I always get angsty about old players and how they're going to hold up. Morris has been hurt a time or two, also, if I recall. But Portland needs somebody to go in and play shortstop because, as has been the want of the conversation around Discord, Sammy McNeil Jr. is no longer the guy, as you kind of projected at the beginning of the season when his range dropped. That turned pretty ugly pretty quickly. Both a combination of the raw skill set and ratings and the probably random vagaries of defense did not stack up particularly well for Sammy Jr. or Sammy McNeil. He's not a junior. I like the. I just like what Lane has done here before it's all said and done. I think he got essentially 1 3/4 prospect with a absolute flyer thrown in there, and the flyer is only 19 years old or a very young kid who could grow. I think the second baseman is the most interesting guy there with Morales, right?
Yeah.
To your point, I mean, even if he doesn't grow his defense, with the offensive profile and the power, he should be at least a borderline average kind of a guy, assuming he grows into his powers and so forth. And he's 19 and he's already grown into most of it. So, um, if he does manage to bump a little bit in a couple of places, then again, he becomes not just maybe kind of borderline average, he becomes a really useful full timer. And at 19, he has plenty of time. He's through the early stage of the caustic development period, and he really should be picking up soon if he's going to. So, interesting deal. Steve Morris, hometown favorite. Absolutely hate to see players like that traded, except, in real life, when a guy like that is traded to a contender, the losing team fans go, "Oh crap!" But at least my guy's got a chance at a ring, right?
Yeah.
Because he's obviously coming to the end. He's come to the end of the string. So really great. I think this is a great deal on both sides, and another example of Chris is focused and doing the things that he needs to do. So let's move along here. Next, we've got another huge deal, right? Your big deal, San Fernando. Dealing Carlos Williams out of your major league roster. Couple of prospects, Ryan Mullen and Cosmin Niculescu. I love these names. In return, you pick up Brent Chappell, who is the big name, I think, in the deal. Enrique Perez and Tony Moran, AAA, AA, and Single A, all starting pitchers. So essentially, you get throw out 2 starting pitchers and a reliever, and get 3 starting pitchers back. You're involved in it. Tell me how you read it. Tell me what are your thoughts. The one thing I will say is Chappell is still hurt. And so how did that play in your mind?
So far he's still normal, for whatever it's worth, injury rating, and I want to say like one of his pitches developed a point or something while he's been out, so like he's trending upward. Nothing has bumped.
Mm-hmm.
He's out basically the whole year. And who knows? He could come back and his stamina could cut in half, and now I have a reliever, like a worse reliever for my super stud reliever. That would hurt. So it's kind of rolling the dice, and I think Chad knows that. I also think he had one other shoulder injury earlier, and this is like shoulder inflammation. The shoulder could become a problem. But he's kind of like ready to go. Like he could start next year for sure.
Yeah.
He's gonna be kind of splitty until his changeup comes in. He's got maybe one of those changeups that's kind of stuck. We'll see. He'll definitely go into the Devil Lab secondary pitch or try to get that thing going.
Right.
But I really like the other starters too. I think both of those guys are like Moran and Perez are both. Like Perez is almost ready to go too. He'll probably start some games next year, if not towards the end of this year, and he looks like he could be like a 3rd or 4th starter. They all keep the ball in the park, which I have to pay attention to because my ballpark is a launching pad. Moran a little further away. Moran's fragile. I don't like his pitch repertoire, but like I've tried to come around to the pitches don't really matter. Rating, they can create splits and do a few things, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, Moran looks like a pretty good starter too. So I need starting pitching. I mentioned that with Swanson, like he's my ace. I barely have anything behind him. So let's try to have a wave of starters starting to become ready next year because my offense is basically young plus Yu Suzuki's like 30, and I think he could mash for like 4 or 5 years more. So I don't think I need to trade him yet. Keep going steady on the offense. Try to get some pitchers to start coming up next year. Maybe sign a free agent starter or something. Williams has 2 stamina. He's really valuable to Nashville because they need him in the postseason and stuff. But for a team that's trying to move up, I don't need him that much. And he's not I mean, his ERA's been good, but he's been like kind of walking guys and probably really good. But I just don't love relievers, so give me some starting pitchers.
Yeah, I don't know that Williams was really doing what you needed done right now anyway. The thing that I find most interesting about, and we're going to get into the next trade, is going to also include Nashville trading away a bunch of starting pitching, interesting, close to ready starting pitching. The first comment that I have on these two trades, your deal with Nashville, and then Nashville, I'll introduce Nashville's deal with Cobble Hill to bring Jose Torres over. Fundamentally, what Chad has done here and what Nashville has done here is taken a big chunk of their starting pitching future and moved it. Chappell, you just mentioned Chappell, Perez, and Moran. I agree. All three of those are, Chappell is the most intriguing one without any question, but Perez and Moran are interesting. I'm going to get into the Nashville Cobble Hill one because they dealt AAA Dave Labonte, AA Luis Medina, and Single A Cosmin Grigore, along with a extremely interesting but extremely young rookie level shortstop Lau Po Chow to Cobble Hill for Jose Torres, who is either a starter or a reliever, depending on whatever you want to do. Three stamina, and another rookie ball pitcher Utba Fawaz. I look at these two together almost, and it's an indicator of the depth of Nashville's organization, that they can take this kind of starting pitching talent in the minors and move it to load up, stock up. That pitching staff is now it was already quite good. The current day pitching staff in Nashville is a little bit eye blistering in certain ways. Adding Jose Torres to that already interesting staff has got to make the rest of the Heartland struggle a little bit. So, nice move, I think, for Cobble Hill. Nice move, I think, for you guys. And in the context of the fact that Nashville gave up future to get current, nice move for Nashville. Nice moves for Nashville. These are fun trades to me. How do you think of the Nashville situation between your deal and the Cobble Hill deal?
Dude, Chad's been asked about Williams since the offseason, so I spent quite a bit of time just digging through their pitching prospects, and it's kind of giving me a headache. Like a lot of times the team will ask, and you'll be like, "All right, here's the one guy who works. Will you trade him or not?" With Chaz, I feel like I had to get a spreadsheet out and list 20 guys and somehow rank them. And so he traded six good starting pitching prospects, and that's a third of what he has. And he got back a couple of kind of interesting arms from me that will probably bump into being the next good prospect 3 years from now. So he just has a backlog. He's got all these good young starters already in the majors. There's nowhere for these guys to ascend to. So it's like you said, it's the right move to convert them into something he needs now. And he got young relievers who will be cost controlled even. For the most part, Torres will be ARB eligible, but won't be super expensive. So, yeah, how could me and Cobble Hill not do it? It's in our best. Like you said, it might have caused a nervous breakdown in Des Moines as we go over the next few trades of just holy crap, how could I ever compete with this? And I'm sure Alan was not super pleased, but I would hope he understands it.
Yeah, I think
I think we got value back. We made him pay the behemoth tax. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's there is a intellectually fun conversation going around, the league. The don't trade with Nashville banner flies on all the parks, right? Don't trade with Nashville, but
My
you
first
know,
trade with Nashville.
there you go. The but the real caveat to that and is always ask for more, and I think I like these deals. I think they're good deals for all around. I think the value that came out of Nashville is solid and real. Um, if that shortstop pans out for Cobble Hill, that might sway things pretty heavily. It just depends. Torres is going to actually have to be paid going through his actual arbitration years here, so Nashville's not getting the Minsal seasons that they probably would have liked. And the only real issue with Torres is that he's a bit of an injury risk, right? And if his stamina drops another level, then really he is he's nothing more than a reliever. But a really top-notch reliever is worth a whole lot. So if you can get 100 innings out of him, then he's worth quite a bit. So
Yeah.
interesting deals across the board.
All right. Next, you keep us moving because I still can't even see the top of the screen. Um, the guy who kind of, in my opinion, kicked this off. So I saw Kamish post a trade block with all of his pretty good players, and that's what kind of like made me think maybe I'm ready to start trading. So he finally gets in on the action, and he trades his shortstop Jorge Madrid, who's struggling a little bit this year, but had a pretty good year last year, and a rookie ball pitching prospect, Abdul Khalik Corey, who's kind of a decent looking prospect, got a ways to go, but he's 20, to Austin. And Austin, I think, has been looking for a shortstop for a while, so they've got to be thrilled to get Madrid. And they trade Pepe Rivera, Cheese Dog, as his friends call him, who I assume he's their closer. He's not getting a lot of saves, but he was starting up until this year. Interesting. Yeah, Cheese Dog's got 3 pitches. Yeah, I wonder if he's going to start in Vegas. He wasn't starting in Austin this year. He's got big splits, but talented pitcher. Pretty good base ratings. You just want to try to get him to face righties. And then Cipriano Menendez, a pretty darn good pitching prospect, relief pitching prospect. He's only got 2 pitches. He was an 8th-round pick a few years ago, but he's got that high stuff profile you mentioned before. Game gives him 55 potential, so there's your price to try to get a shortstop. Austin doing a little, it's kind of a buy and sell. They traded a prospect. They also moved on from a pitcher, kind of frustrated them, and he's going to get expensive if he pitches well. What I noticed looking at Vegas's roster, when I see somebody trade their starting shortstop, how does he do that? And then Matt's got a bunch of like 9 range kind of hanging out on his roster. I think I found 2 or 3 between like majors and AAA who are like major league ready. So I think he's just been struggling to get a prospect and an interesting looking pitcher. He looks like the classic like guy who relieved somewhere else that Matt starts and will probably be a good starter in Vegas. So I kind of like the trade more so from Vegas' side, but I get it for Austin because they just need a shortstop, and they might be able to like kind of extend Madrid here pretty soon. He's still so young. He got called up really young. He should be a good defender for another half decade, and fills that big need for them.
Yeah, I don't think Madrid is the guy who's going to take Austin to the championship, but I think Chuck has been pretty vocal in trying to figure out how to get his team put together and working. And I think shortstops are very hard to come about. And at this stage, I think Madrid is a guy that works completely for Austin. Because he's been extremely reliable in the field, always a plus fielder, the bat doesn't really play particularly well, but it is good enough to keep him as maybe slightly a league average, or I mean, he's a solid guy, and I think his pitchers need a solid guy right now. I don't think the price was overly dear, but I think Vegas, like you said, Vegas can. Matt is just constantly full of finding um, low profile guys who can plug in and just play. And I think it's pretty clear he's decided that his hustlers are not going to be at the top. So he's willing to move pieces around to make things work. I think this is just a workman, a blue collar deal for both sides, and I liked it for him. It's one of those that if you go back and you look at it in 3 years, one of these two teams is probably going to win the deal, or nothing will come of it whatsoever, right? But the win is not going to be a slam dunk, 20 WAR separation before it's all said and done.
Yeah, Austin doesn't need relief pitcher prospects particularly bad right now.
Well, you mentioned earlier on that perhaps the big push from Nashville has moved Des Moines to do some things, and we run into the first kind of big thing with Des Moines moving third baseman Felix Perano to Cape Fear for Major League outfielder Zia Turks. Interesting deal to me. Des Moines retains 50% of Pereno's salary. What is your take? When you were talking about perhaps Des Moines has gotten frozen out or spooked by all of the Nashville stuff, how does that play into this deal?
It doesn't yet. So for now, this just looks like a smart business decision for Des Moines. Turks is Mr. Waiver Wire self. He was on waivers. He's a zero return. It's all about Cape Fear wants to roll the dice on Perino playing well again. I don't think it's going to happen. I would rather selling than buying Mr. Perino, but there's a chance it works for Woods. So maybe he hits, but it's just getting out of a contract, and I get this one for Des Moines. I think this is a smart move on their part.
Yeah. How many years is left on Perino? Is he in his last year?
I don't think so. Am I wrong? Changes things. It's
no,
through
he's
60.
through 65. Yeah,
Like
that's
player option. That's bad.
Yeah, that's interesting. At 35, yeah.
He can still run because 35-year-olds can still run, but he can't make contact anymore. There's better ways to find this production. He was never an amazing defender, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we have two of them in a row because, Micah Harrison, Des Moines again, goes to Cape Fear for Jose Barron and Raul Castaneda. So effectively, if you just put these two together, it's a 2-for-3 deal. In particular, talk to me. I think it's Micah Harrington was the player I was most interested in this deal. What are your thoughts about Harrington moving off?
Okay, this is where I start losing the thread a little bit with Des Moines. Harrington's good. I think he should have brought back like some good prospects because New Orleans is paying half of his contract. So when you look at his salary on his page, you have to keep in mind that you're only having to pick up half of that. And I think it's a good thing that you can have Harrington for next year too. He's only 31. It's been like a good innings eating middle rotation, bordering on second starter for a long time. He was really good in New Orleans. He's just a good player. Castaneda has a bunch of stuff in control, but no movement. So we'll see how that experiment works out. Looks like he's pitched in the majors a little bit. He's kind of useful last year, but he's a reliever. You know how I feel about relievers, Ron. And then Barron uh, has been a good starter for. He's had kind of like a late career resurgence after struggling for a little while, and he's pitching pretty well again this year. So I think Des Moines' thought process is they just don't want to owe Harrington much this year. I think they're clearing their whole financial commitment, all their liabilities for the future. I think that's what all these trades were about. So that's maybe Harrington for Barron is a one for one trade off this year, not a huge impact, and then you don't have to pay a guy next year, and then you get this
Yeah,
middle reliever.
right. And
Um,
so, I mean, to me, this is the first indicator that something is going on with Des Moines with, that is perhaps not baseball related, right? Or, are they actually kind of giving up the chase, which is an interesting story because it's been fun
they're
to
good.
watch them. They started off, they had a rugged start. They dug their way, they worked their way up the chain. What are they,
They've
third
won
in the
5
division now?
games in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so now they're beginning to make moves that look more like businessy fire, not quite fire sales, but um, I mean, Harrington is good, but he's not like elite, right? Barron is good, can
ish.
be good, but
He's right.
is and Castaneda is. Um, I'm split on relievers. I like relievers when they are min salary and maybe early in their arbitration. I don't like relievers when they start getting to be $3 and $4 million. So Castaneda is a cheap guy. History has shown that sometimes big stuff control guys can do fine giving up the occasional solo homers, right? Um, Not all the time, but there have been some really good pitchers with that profile. But even then, I don't know if you're going for the chase this year. You really like to have Micah Harrison on your on your roster. So I like the move for Cape Fear. I just wonder whether on that side Cape Fear is pretty far down, right? They're 31 and 41, I think it was, if I remember right. Um, but they're loading up on guys like they're trying to make a run for it. And interesting deal. Really, really super interesting deal to me. So,
Harrington will be 32 and controllable next year too. So
yeah,
Cape Fear, you're not going to get that good of a pitcher for $3.5 million as a free agent for next year. So
yeah, no, I think
that's
that's
what it's
a,
about.
yeah, I think it's a nice move for Cape Fear, nice baseball move for Cape Fear. Not a particularly good baseball move for Des Moines, but I don't know that he's playing for the season at this stage. I don't know what I don't know what Jesse is going to be doing right now, and I've not been lurking around Discord well enough the last few days to really follow his story. Um, so there is that.
Well, we know the story in Long Beach, so I think they're running out of players at this point, but they trade Gustavo Espinoza, who looked like one of the premier sluggers in the league until he went to the dev lab this offseason and forgot how to. And now I think he might be like sub replacement level this year. Uh, yes, wow. Negative zero point 0.9 war. He is going to go to San Antonio along with Wilson Perez, who is a 26-year-old left-handed reliever who's maybe kind of what you were just talking about, like minimum salary, lefty, useful, having a pretty good year, throwing a lot of innings for Long Beach this year. Um, San Antonio, interesting team to be buying some players. So Tim must like Espinoza's bounce back potential. He trades second baseman ENL T Rex Radulescu, who's 20 and listed as a second baseman, but will never be a second baseman. This is a first baseman. I don't think he can play any other positions, it looks like. But has some offensive potential. Game gives him 50 potential. I feel like rated by the game kind of rating there. And then another prospect as well, Hannibal Montalvo, relief pitching prospect with 1 stamina, but 10 potential stuff, lefty. So Lane gets all these like weird prospects that have warts, but they have tools and ceilings, and he trades guys who he it's an interesting pairing, right? Because Espinoza like probably should be non-tendered this offseason unless he regains his power and his scouting report fills back out. So he had to pair him with a guy who's been like assuming one of his best relievers in Perez. Perez is a pretty good looking lefty, but he's about to become arbitration eligible. So will he be on the next good Long Beach team? I don't know. So it kind of makes sense because the prospects are kind of interesting.
Yeah, the prospects are kind of wonky. Radulescu, the second baseman, who's not a second baseman, is the most interesting of the second basemen who aren't second basemen that I have seen at this stage, because his offensive profile looks like it could, if he winds up on the higher end of some of those bars, it could translate to being a pretty good first baseman, right? Some of the others, you're not certain their offensive profile really fits a first baseman. They'd be really good defensive first basemen, but they would not necessarily carry the bat that you would like in the corner, whereas Radulescu potentially could. But you don't know, because you don't know where he's going to be on those bars, right? So you have to let him play and see. It's an interesting pickup from Long Beach. And I like that. Espinosa, it was not going to be bringing in too much at this particular stage, but I kind of like, if he does grow back a little bit, then he should be a pretty solid first baseman, even with those ratings. I mean, he really should. 8 power, I think he still has, what was he, 10, and he dropped to 8 or something like that. Wilson Perez can play. I don't know that he helps either San Antonio or Long Beach for where they're at right now, but it's fine. I don't know really what to make of Montalvo at this stage. I think the most interesting guy in the deal is Radulescu, specifically because if he just grows to the high end of those rating bars, he would be a potentially valuable guy. And so to me, it's almost like if I'm in San Antonio's shoes, Tim is essentially saying, let me take a lottery ticket on Espinosa growing back up something close to his ratings. And if that works out, then I probably win pretty big, because if Espinosa does grow back up to his ratings and can play, then he's the best player of the 4. Otherwise, the idea that he could be non-tendered is completely on the table, right? So at this stage, you're playing Wheel of Fortune, spin and see what you get. At the end of the day, I think Lane, again, hits his plan marker better from what I can tell. I cannot tell Tim's plan on San Antonio right now, but admittedly, a part of that is I've not been paying attention to San Antonio as closely as I have Long Beach, simply because they're not in my division. So there's that from my point of view. Another huge deal. You referenced it a little bit when you mentioned Charlotte coming out of the Atlantic Division, right? Charlotte ships $4 million and 5 players to Cobble Hill for arguably one of the best looking starting pitchers in the league, in Larry Jensen. I have not actually paid attention to how Jensen has been doing this year. I would guess that he's not doing particularly great in Cobble Hill, just because it's Cobble Hill. He's 5-8 with a 4.20 ERA at age 22. I am a big fan of Larry Jensen, so I think that pickup for Charlotte is huge. And from your conversation it sounds to me like you think that is huge for them also. What did you think of the package Charlotte gave up? Ignacio Lewis and Jose Gonzalez, starter and reliever at the major league level. Kutsi Abbas, a second baseman that, if I remember right, is also more of a first baseman, but I can't remember for sure. Daniel Byram, outfielder at rookie league, and then an international prospect in Carlos Ramirez, plus the $4 million, which $4 million for Cobble Hill is an important number. So,
And Jensen's already fragile.
mm-hmm.
I think that's important to note
Yeah, that's
too.
fair too.
Like could have just sat on for another year and probably gotten a similar value next year, but if he gets hurt,
Mm-hmm.
they're just completely gutting the team. Chulis is more of a lover. Like you don't see GMs of who had as much success as he has had, like quantity over quality as much as he does. But he's always kind of down to take like 5 players, um, and so that's what he did. I have been an Ignacio Lewis hater, and I thought he just like really overperformed last year. He finally caught up with him towards the end of the year, and he's struggling this year, and he's 26. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the weaker players in the return. But he just gives Shulis somebody to tell the fans they're still kind of trying. The key players are probably the prospects.
Oh yeah.
Gonzalez is a reliever, so he'll probably get traded again next year or something for more prospects. Abbas actually can't play defense. He's a real second baseman. He's got 60 potential, and he's got a long road ahead of him. He's underdeveloped, but that means he could be like an all-star caliber player if he fills out.
Right. He can play outfield too. That's
Oh yeah. Byram like looks like one of those guys who's gonna like bump, and like he reminds me of the guys who Sacramento would just like you'd be like, why does this guy have 12 gap power? And like Byram's got 10 potential gap power. So he can play some defense in the outfield. 16th round pick, interesting bumper. I think some people think like the guys who bump are likely to fill out their potential than guys who are just kind of treading water. And then Ramirez is just sort of another guy. I mean, I don't think Charlotte had a ton in their farm systems. This has to kind of gut it. And these guys are like a 16th round pick and then a couple of international free agents in Abbas and Ramirez. Maybe they were scouting discoveries. Nope, international free agents. Long road ahead. Good tools. Like I said, I think you'll see Ignacio Lewis and Jose Gonzalez just traded for more prospects like down the line. So it'll kind of turn into this trade tree of like all the prospects they acquire. I don't know. That's probably enough talking about that side. The exciting side is Charlotte just getting this guy who is really good. And Jensen's been held back by his team probably, and I could see him just like taking off kind of the way Bob Anderson kind of took off season last year. And Charlotte has this killer offense, and now they've added in just less than a year Anderson and Jensen to that mix as well at the top of the rotation to go with Matt Maneke, like their ace they already have. I'm just pretty excited about like Charlotte's team. I think it's a shame Nada's not around because man, what a stacked team they would have. But those three teams in the Atlantic, it's like them and Nashville for the 4 best teams in the league right now. I think so. It's kind of cool to see 3 of them all be in one division and competing with one another.
Yeah, I think Nathan, now that Nathan has been around the league for a while, you get a flavor for who he is as a general manager, and he makes some really nice moves. I think in order to stay toward the top of the Atlantic in this modern era, you have to be able to keep churning the churning the positions and getting the top guys into your organization. I think the players that Charlotte moved were a reasonable price for Jensen, and a part of that is his fragility. But again, I'm biased because I just like Larry Jensen a whole ton. Your conversation about Shoeless and quantity. He got a combination of quantity and quality, and Shoeless is a guy who is near and dear to my plays the game in a fashion that is near and dear to my heart from a GM standpoint. He values players of different quality, skill sets differently than I do. But one of the things that I like about watching what Shoeless does, and in my opinion, people should watch what he's doing now, because he's going to build. If I've got my frame on right, he's going to build a very broad minor league team, minor league organization. And so right now, the Brooklyn / Cobble Hill farm system was barren, right? And I also know that he's been working hard on things like finding minor league coaches, which is a 2 and 3 year period. It takes a long time to get things set up. So I think that once he had his dreams of winning 80 games dashed, I think the fact that Torres and Jensen have been moved are him basically saying, okay, screw it, I'm going to make this thing kind of work. But I think Nathan in Charlotte fans have to be extremely jazzed to have Larry Jensen added onto this team. And I will agree with you. I'm not certain I agree with you that I expect Charlotte to come out on top. But if they had not made this move, then they were not going to. I'll put it that way, right? But this move makes that a possible situation. And he's fragile, so basically you just kind of hope he doesn't get hurt. But he's very young, and I've seen a lot of fragile players who are young not get hurt until they start getting hurt years down the line. So, really good move for Charlotte, and a workmanlike move for Cobble Hill, in my opinion. That's those are my thoughts anyway.
Yeah. So Charlotte makes the next trade as well. Charm City had picked up Emilio Reyes from Long Beach. So I think I mentioned they were kind of trying some sort of mediocre guys that weren't working out. One was Dennis Armitage. They trade him to a division rival, which would raise eyebrows, but he's a bench player, so it's not like you're really helping your rival too much. Armitage, like I said, just a bench player backup. Charlotte sends the last 2 prospects left in their farm system over that kid. A rookie ball reliever named Guru Serrano Chiba, who's a 35 potential, so not a ton there. And then Old Big Head, which the real loss there is the nickname, as Nathan said in his team news. That's my favorite nickname I've seen in a long time. It's a shame he's not a better player, but he's 40 potential. Maybe he'll be a reliever someday, but he's got a long. So, just pretty inconsequential trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think that fundamentally it's the main thing that I see out of that is $3 million of salary goes to Charlotte. So I guess Nathan looked at Armitage as a guy who could potentially plug in as some kind of depth. I mean, I don't think he's going to be. Charlotte didn't need a full-time center fielder. I mean, he's a good defensive center fielder as far as that goes.
Yeah, he's just going to be a backup, and he's a guy that Chicago or Atlantic City maybe could have taken a flyer on too, but he's making a little money. So like I mentioned before, I don't know their financial situations.
Yeah, he's a little money, and he's got 1 more year left on his contract. So, but I mean, that kind of money you can, if you're making the money, if you're in Charlotte, you can handle a $3 million. You can handle eating $3 million if you 6 months later decide, and Armitage is useful. I mean, he's not he's a solid defender. It's nice to have a center fielder. It's nice to have center field depth. So If nothing else, it's kind of a playoff run move for him, or an insurance policy against a playoff move is maybe how I would look at that. I've come to the conclusion that Charlotte doesn't do anything without a reason. So probably not the biggest deal on the board, but quite interesting in its own light. So then we move on to another Des Moines situation. We've got like 3 straight Des Moines deals to talk about where the wheels start to get even more interesting, right? They traded first baseman Alonso Finn to Vegas for AAA center fielder Chandler Larkman. And I think the plan, it sounds like from the news notes, is that Larkman is going to play center field in Des Moines. This is exhibit. To me, this is exhibit B or C or D, whichever one it is, that starts to make me say Des Moines is kind of waving a white flag here, because I don't see Chandler Larkman as the kind of guy who is going to make a difference in the Heartland race this year. What is your take on this one?
Larkman maybe will be an average defender in the majors. Needs to develop a little bit. I just think you can get. Yeah, I know he's a first baseman, and first basemen aren't driving big prices, but like Huckleberry Flynn here, making the minimum this year, can even play a little corner outfield if you want to be imaginative. Like, how is he not worth more? He's 23. And I mean, Des Moines put that all these guys were on the block, but I don't know what the rush is to trade them like this sim. That's the thing that like doesn't make sense about all this. They're facing a fiscal cliff for next year. So maybe you trade a couple guys, but still can make playoff money this year. That like helps you next year with some of your financial issues. And then where did this come from all of a sudden? And like, why can't you wait a couple sims to like see if Flynn's just worth more than this? So
yeah, so we pair that up, and I guess let me do a similar thing to what I've done with you in the past, because the next one is a Des Moines deal with the with our lovable San Fernando Bears, right, where you pick up Masakaru Matsuniga, catcher, and you deal Kutz Madi. That's got to be a little bit tough on the heartstrings. Madi has been kind of a stalwart for you for some time here. And then Bob Butler and AAA minor leaguer Don Starr. I guess maybe bounce those together to a degree. Put yourself in Des Moines' shoes. What are your thoughts from San Fernando's point of view? How were you thinking about it? And how do you think your deal plays along with some of the others that Des Moines is doing?
Matsunaga has 2 more years guaranteed of escalating value the next 2 years. It's kind of like they bought out arbitration basically from Matsunaga. So again, it's got to be a financial incentive because they're not really getting anything in return. Body has a vesting contract that's not going to vest for next year. Me retaining half of it means it's still more money than Matsunaga's making this year. So it's got to be all about the future dollars. I will say, like, Matsunaga's skills have eroded slightly. He's been like a 5 WAR catcher the last 2 years, catching WAR being what it is. His framing runs were plus 16 last year, and this year they're like -3. I don't know, I'm close, but that's kind of weird. Normally framing runs are pretty consistent. He's got an 8 rating. Have another hand. But he's been hitting, so I don't know. He's a switch hitter. That's pretty cool for a catcher.
Yeah,
he's a good player.
He's a switch hitter, and he's much stronger from the left side of the plate. So that's right. He's effectively a left-handed hitter when it comes right down to it. So I like that pickup for you without any question. And I admit I kind of scratch my head as far as exactly what Jesse is getting out of it. Um, if it's money, I mean, it's not that much money, is it? Matsunaga's, what was his contract?
It escalates a little bit. I want to say he makes like 6 and 8 ish. Yeah, the
Yeah,
next 2
six
years.
three and 7-6. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm.
but with the demand rate, like players are demanding more now.
Yes,
That's something I wanted to bring up on this podcast. Is like I think some of these contracts that got locked in before the demand thing was moved up by the commissioner are going to be kind of valuable. So you kind of want like a Micah Harrington locked in at 3.7, and some of these different players like Matsunaga is going to get way more than that as a free agent, and Butler has 1 year control left. That's all I'm really trading
right.
in this deal.
Yeah. So, like I say, I like this deal from you. We're probably going to be talking too long to really get into the question of contracts and version 26 and things like that. So maybe we do that for our next one. But yeah, there is some value to think about there, right? As players begin to ask more, um, you know, ultimately what you're saying is that the market floor has been lower in the past, perhaps artificially lower, simply because players could have asked for more and gotten it, right? The question isn't so much will they ask for more, the question is will they get it? And at the end of the day, if they get it, then the contracts that were signed before the change are undervalued. If they
Yeah,
ask
for
for it,
free agents market, but for
right?
extensions, if they're just asking for more, that's what it is.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. If they ask for more and they get it, then
Yeah,
you know,
fair.
in that sense, you're basically saying I don't want to let my player go to free agency because I'm afraid that I'm going to have to spend even more for them. Um, and so ultimately, are you wrong? Would you have been better to let this player? Would Des Moines have been better to let Matsunaga play for 2 more years and then go to free agency? You know, I'm using him just because he's on the board, right? Um, you know, will it reward a GM who is willing to say, you're asking for more than market value, I'm going to let you go to the market, and then I will buy you for less on the market? That's a gutsy call, right? Because that requires the rest of the teams to not overpay. And if the rest of the teams overpay, then in reality the market is higher. So how do you play that philosophy game? I don't know. That is an interesting one. Um, but then we add the third Des Moines trade on here, right? Where starting pitcher Garth Dobbs and right fielder Julio Perez, both off of the major league roster, go to Phoenix for three more players off the major league roster. Rich Dares, the notorious Bane McCoy, who was dealt to Phoenix the week before, right on the 7-day contract, and starting pitcher Javier Duarte. So here's the triple trifecta for Des Moines, right? Um, I hear, okay, obligatory. I hate Rich Dares. I've said it. Now we can go on. Thoughts about the Phoenix deal?
McCoy is just a couple $1 million for this year. Doesn't really have value. Clearly, like I said earlier, traded for a waiver wire guy.
Mm,
So it's all about Duarte. Duarte is a good pitcher, and Jesse talked about how he regretted trading Duarte. I traded Duarte to Des Moines originally in the Sonny Bigelow trade, and always been a good starting pitching prospect. He looks like he'll be a good starting pitcher. It's just that he's hurt for he'll be back like in June of next year. So
mm,
he's not we'll see what kind of player he is when he returns. Is probably the main point there. So that's it, really, I think, in the return. On the traded away side, you have Garth Dobbs, who has a contract extension that's pretty long that, Des Moines signed, um, where he's going to make more than $10 million guaranteed the next 3 years. Then he's got a couple of team options in 67 and 68. Then their ace pitcher, um, ever since kind of making the leap forward last year. Yeah, he was a 4.7 WAR, our WAR 6.5 because his ERA was so low and he ate so many innings. Really good pitcher last year. He's kind of quirky. He's an Iron Man. His base ratings look really good. He does struggle a little more against lefties, but even like 666 ratings, like that's like an okay pitcher in general. If that's your weak platoon side, that's survivable. And like this would be again where I'm talking about like if the high end guys they're gonna get a little more money from higher. I hear you on all the game theory, but it will tick them up a little bit.
Sure.
Dobbs' contract is a great contract. Like for agency, he'd do better than that. So
Yeah, I think
it
so
should
too.
have trade value. Um,
And he's
and then
29.
Perez, yeah, he's still in his prime. And then Perez has, I think he was called up on opening day originally, so he's only got one more year of arbitration, where he'll make decent change, but he's in his prime and he's a slugger, like star player. He had 42 home runs last year, 38 the year before. He's already got 18 this year. 144 OPS plus, same year basically he had last year. These guys each, like Duarte for Dobbs would be kind of an interesting trade. I don't understand how Perez gets stapled on, and then you have to like take Bane McCoy back, who has borderline negative trade value, and Rich Dares definitely has negative trade value. Is Dares signed beyond this year? Surely he's not.
I do my best to not pay attention to Rich Dares. I don't
Okay,
know.
you got like your computer blocks you from opening his page.
Yeah, I attempted to click on it, and I had the big red warning, DEFCON 7
Dude,
flashing.
he's guaranteed $9.8 million next year, so it doesn't even help.
Oh my.
So I saw this trade and I was like, is the GB gonna like look at some like I started getting worried about I thought I don't know. This trade is not defensible in my opinion. Like he likes Duarte, but I'm just gonna say it. I don't think you could write a post that convinced me that this trade makes any sense.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting one. I am not in Jesse's head at this stage, and it will be interesting to see if he releases some more. I haven't noticed that. One thing I've not done in the past 4 or 5 days is do a serious job of paying attention to team news. I need to go catch up on that. So maybe he's already released some things about it and what he's doing there. But Des Moines seems to be in some kind of a interesting, almost fire sale mode, and I don't completely understand it yet. So um, at this point, to me, it kind of is what it is, but I don't completely understand. Julio Perez is a perfectly great, if nothing else, solid left-handed bat, platoon bat, who can play some defense. So version 26 goes into more splits, so perhaps his lefty to lefty split slows him down some, but um, still. Let's move on and let's talk about um, the last Nashville trade. Yep. Nashville trades Kelly Calhoun to Atlantic City for A-ball pitcher George Estrada. Um,
That's just Chad moving his like roster crunch timing window back. So he trades a guy who's probably the better talent in the trade. So good on Atlantic City for, and they're in the playoff hunt for getting a guy who's ready to pitch in the BBA now in Calhoun. Um, yeah, he's got a couple years of service time. He's been pitching in
Mhm.
Nashville. He's making league minimum now, but he'll be ARB eligible soon. He's not been very good this year, but all they gave up, Jorge Estrada, third round pick this year. He could be. He's a starting pitching prospect.
Mhm.
It's it's a good trade for Nashville. I get it from Atlantic City's standpoint too. If they think Calhoun can turn things around and pitch better this year.
Yeah. Does Nashville have a 40-man crunch? Well, actually, Calhoun probably was out of waivers,
Yeah,
out
I'm
of
using that.
options.
It's out of options. I'm using those somewhat synonymously
Right.
here, but you're right. There's a distinction to be made.
So ultimately, I think fundamentally my read on this without knowing anything else is Nashville needed a roster spot, figured they were going to lose Calhoun to waivers, so trade him for something of interest. And Estrada is of interest. So
Yeah,
that's
third round.
probably, that makes as much sense as anything. Be interested to hear if Chad responds on that. I believe that is probably the dynamic of what's going on there. Um, so, you know, I guess when you add Jose Torres, you can, give away Kelly Coburn for a guy of interest. And that's probably a pretty good upgrade.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Vancouver and Valencia. Vancouver, Aaron gets into the party with Kenzo Iwamoto, trading him and retaining 25% of his salary. Double A Jose Alanis, starting pitcher Jose Alanis goes to Valencia. In return, Valencia coughs up, is it King Lei Ouyang, Ouyang, starting pitcher.
Iwamoto looks like he's finally hit the end of the line here. At least that's what the scouts are saying. This is a scouts and sabermetrics move because he's got bad fit, but his ERA is 3.5. Some of that's the Vancouver ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
But he's given up as many home runs in 87 innings as he normally would give up in like a whole season. And he's old and he's lumpy. So I think he's just done. And so Aaron is trying to get out in front of that, gets a better pitcher for him. And I'm not going to say his name. You did a nice job butchering it there yourself, Ron. But
Who?
it was
Jose
like a fourth.
Alanis?
Yeah. Alanis is, if I remember correctly, yeah, he's kind of an interesting looking pitching prospect. So
Yeah,
good for Valencia to extract that out of the deal.
right. No, I think that's the thing. Iwamoto is a absolute shell of his old self, so um, he's done. He doesn't really um, play. Vancouver needs to get him off of the roster before that's said and done. So they put a interesting prospect in place. Um, Yang, Wei Yang, however you pronounce it, is also an interesting pitcher. He's fine. Don't know the finances on him. Let's see.
Yeah,
Okay, he's
because
still in his.
Iwamoto's going to need a $3 million team option, double team option buyout this year. So Valencia's picking up the tab on that. So I kind of think Valencia should have tried to not get Iwamoto back in the deal, but
Yeah,
uh,
that's probably true.
because
Let's see what Greg's doing
Lang,
on his
yeah,
cash finances, because I know his basic approach this year was go low salary, attempt to make some money. So maybe if he's making enough money, the $3 million team buyout isn't a big deal. But I don't know what his finances actually are there. So
let, let me put it this way: Would you sign Alanis to a $3 million signing bonus? Who's a free agent?
Probably not, but it depended on all context.
Right. It's close, right? Maybe that is
Yeah,
about what his value would be.
right. I mean, he's 18 and his base um, ratings are workable, right? So 3 million's a little
Something.
bit tight, but it's not horrible.
There's things to like. His pitches all can improve still. He's 18. And like you said, it's already kind of workable. The
Yeah,
scouts don't love his potential. But
yeah.
my point being,
He's 18. He throws 98. He keeps the ball on the ground. You know, um, it's not a horrible business decision if you give him. If he were IFA and got a $3 million bonus, you'd probably say, you overspent a little bit, but it's not massively horrible. There have been
I
more
think he'd
spent
get,
on less.
yeah, I think he could get 5 or 6 from like a Charm City or Nashville or something. If he was in free agency, I think he'd get 6, $7 million.
Yeah, it could be.
But
Right.
to the you and I's of the world, 3 sounds a little high.
Yeah.
My point being, that's what you paid kind of for him because you're having to pay Iwamoto's buyout. You're having to pay Iwamoto's salary. So you have to think he's going to help you win a little bit this year or something. It means you're not getting any return for your pitcher you traded either, and there's a pitcher trade market, so
Yeah.
they should have gotten a little more.
Alrighty. Well, the last two deals on the list are interesting. Dollar General Store deals. Um, you get Valencia spending a solid $1 to buy Dana Polani, starting pitcher, plus gets 1.25 million back. Same thing, Vancouver gives Cobble Hill another shiny, crisp $1 bill and gets relief pitcher Dave Wolford and another $1.25 million back. So, basically Cobble Hill shedding some salary for some cash. Each of these teams essentially taking on a, in quotes, free player. Right? Polani gets essentially the 1.25 pays for his salary this year, and then is it Greg Valencia is on the line for Polani's $2 million next year, and let's see, Wolford's finances.
He's a free agent to be.
He's a free agent to be. Okay.
Yeah. So Wolford saves Cobble Hill a little money, but barely any. So whatever. He doesn't look like he's much more than a waiver wire believer. He's had a couple good years in his career. He's like your 7th or 8th guy in your bullpen. Polani, Greg's got to like him for next year. So you got to pay his tab next year too.
Yeah.
But he's left-handed. He's only 34, right? So yeah, maybe it's fine. I don't know. I'd rather have the flexibility, I think, and be able to pick my guy for $2 million this offseason. But sure.
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, he's, the movement home run, keeps the ball in the park. So there's value there. And like you said, he's left-handed, and he's got an interesting split, right? He's a reverse split, stronger against right-handed batters than left-handed batters. But
Yes.
yeah, they're interesting anyway. His numbers are decent. He's been a solid 90, upper 90 FIP minus throughout all of his career. He's having a difficult year in Cobble Hill, but every time you look at a pitcher in Cobble Hill, they're having a difficult year. So, for $2 million, perhaps that's maybe a little overpay, but he seems like a reliable enough guy. The one problem that I see with Pulani in that whole question is he lost a year for injury. So how much do you believe past performance reflects reality? I don't know. Not a huge set of deals either way, but at the end of the day, uh, examples of Valencia and Cobble Hill in particular are teams not going anywhere this year, and Vancouver is essentially a situation where Wolford can help him for the short term, and he doesn't have any risk. So who's to complain?
Had to make sure we had every kind of trade, so we didn't have the dollar trades yet. So I'm glad we got those in for the sim too, just to keep commission on this.
There you go. Alrighty, we've made it through all 24 of the deals. And if anybody is still listening to us, oh my gosh. Very, very active pre-trade deadline, trade deadline kind of activity. And so going to be really fascinating to see how things plan out or play out here over the next week or two as the ramifications of these start to settle in. An exciting week. It was a bad week for me to miss. I wish I would have been able to pay attention to it in real time and try to figure out what was going on, because that is part of the great fun of being in this league. Is occasionally you'll get a period like this where things are just going right, and trying to figure out what everyone is doing is fun. I really enjoy walking through all of these and trying to pretend like I know what they're doing. So, with that, I think we should probably call this something around 2-hour conversation a podcast. Do you have any last kind of thoughts about your feelings on these 24 deals and where the league is standing right now?
We're really excited about this season, and it's a year for the ages, just in surprising ways. Just I think this is the wildest thing I've ever seen in this league. And I woke to the Des Moines trade off, and now I finally go to bed here. It's after midnight. Spending 2 hours talking about them, but it's just an endless content mill here. We could have talked about these trades for another 2 hours.
I know it. It's a lot of fun, and this year has been a lot of fun. It is pretty close to as competitive as I've been expecting it to be, and maybe that's a root of where this
Hmm.
cycle spun up. There's a lot of teams that are trying to get better, and a lot of teams who are trying to get better who are giving up on the year too. I mean, in that sense, right? I mean, a set of really well done kind of what I'll call fire sales. Cobble Hill, I guess you call what Cobble Hill is doing a fire sale too. They're taking all of their big pieces and moving them. Um, you know, um, so really fun. A lot of interest in what's going to happen over the next sim or two. We'll finish this up right now. Thank you for your time and your in-depth conversation. We'll have to do this again next week and see where we're at.
Over under 24 more trades. We'll see.
I think I got to take the under on that, but I've been wrong before. Have a fantastic rest of your night, Kurt. Thank you for staying up so much later, and we'll chat again here pretty quick.
Good night, everyone. Go Bears.
Go Bears.